Hey, what's going on, guys? OJ back here with another video, and today we're going to be talking about UFC referees and just ranking them based on how good or bad they are. Thank you to Navvac underscore 86 for giving me this video idea. And if you guys want to chuck in your video ideas, please let me know in the comments down below, and I'll try to make them. But yeah, because of him, we're getting a decent rough estimation of how I would rank a lot of these referees. Keep in mind these are kind of recency biased. All right, I'm not gonna sit here and go over like every single controversy these referees had, but I am going to sit here and talk about how good or bad these referees have been doing recently, whether it be like they have no controversial stoppages, or they're just not enforcing the rules well enough, or any of the following above. I'm going to be rating them based on that loose criteria. So in a couple of seconds, I'm gonna have a set of tiers for you guys on the screen. So without wasting any more time, let's jump right into the video. All right, the first referee I want to talk about, Herb Dean. I think he's very overrated. Like, Herb Dean is a good ref, but people consider him the gold standard to MMA refereeing, and I simply don't think that's true. I see recently Herb Dean has been making mistakes, especially with stoppages. Uh, for example, in the Paris card, we had Axel Sola versus Reese McKee. It was a very controversial and weird stoppage from Herb Dean. And also, Herb Dean does not enforce the rules every single time. For example, in the Sean O'Malley versus Merab Dvalishvili fight, Sean O'Malley was grabbing at the gloves repeatedly of Merab Dvalishvili. Yet, for some reason, Herb Dean did not bother to really enforce the rules in that situation. Like, he caught O'Malley doing it once, but it wasn't just a one-time thing because O'Malley was doing that throughout the entire fight. So Herb Dean, he's not a bad ref by any means, and I do rate him higher than most other refs that I'm going to be talking about. But for people to consider him like the gold standard for MMA, like maybe that was true in back in the 2010s, but as far as I'm concerned, like in the 2020s, I don't think he's the gold standard for refereeing in mixed martial arts. All right, now up next we got Marc Goddard. I'm very concerned for fighters who are going to be refed by Marc Goddard because he does all of the mistakes that Herb Dean does, but also he has unfiltered rage, right? For example, in 2024, when Brian Ortega fought Yair Rodriguez, and Brian Ortega didn't immediately let go of the submission, Marc Goddard kind of took it upon himself to kind of intimidate Brian Ortega into letting go of the submission. And it's kind of clear that he has a rage problem. And I do understand it to some extent because Marc Goddard has been given a lot of iffy and weird decisions that he had to take the brunt of the blame for. But at the same time, can you not take it out on like fighters that had nothing to do with those decisions? You know what I mean? So I feel like Marc Goddard, he's has a lot of rage issues, and also, again, he does not enforce the rules. All right. For example, in the main event between Nasruddin Mavov and Caio Borralho a couple of weeks back, Nasruddin and Mavov throughout the entire fight had his fingers out for Caio Borralho to go into in case Caio Borralho ever wanted to engage. And Marc Goddard did not say anything about that. All he kept doing was warning Nasruddin Imavov about opening his fingers. Like, he poked Caio Borralho in the eye 3 times, and not a single point was deducted from that situation. And I am very concerned for anyone who has to fight with Marc Goddard as the referee, because unless you're like a home crowd favorite, you're probably gonna get screwed by Marc Goddard one way or another, whether it be early stoppages in the main event or just not getting like benefit of the doubt with fouls or him just raging at you. One of those 3 things are going to be very apparent. So Marc Goddard, I would be concerned for the fighters whenever he referees. All right, now up next we got Dan Mirgliada. I think for the most part Dan Mirgliada's all right, but I'm going to speak strictly because of what happened yesterday in the co-main event between Rob Font and David Martinez. If you guys don't know what happened, Dan Mirgliada just stood there in the third round and let David Martinez nonstop hit Rob Font after the bell rung for like 7 to 10 seconds. Simply put, Rob Font could have actually got knocked out in that situation. And Dan Mirgliata, for some reason, he's just there, right? He's just watching it happen. And he didn't think to himself, oh, yeah, I heard the last 10 seconds go off. Oh, maybe I should try to stop the fight. Yeah, you know what? I don't know. Like, Dan Mirgliata, again, he normally doesn't do this, but because he just did this recently, and I will say it's a one-time offense, so I'm not gonna be concerned for the fighters, but I do think that Dan Mergliata is going to be overrated, right? He might not go for, like, another few months with any fuck-ups, but, yeah, I could see Dan Mergliata doing something like that again, and it is a little bit concerning in my opinion. Alright, now up next, we got, Gary Copeland. Yeah, this guy just, needs to be fired immediately. Like, what do I start with Gary Copeland? If you guys don't know who he is, he's the guy who just kind of made a debacle with the Dana White Contender Series last week, and it's just not good. Like the way he referees, the way he handles decisions, it all feels rushed. It all feels half-assed, and I don't have any confidence in Gary Copeland's ability to make fair decisions at like critical times. I don't have any confidence in him protecting the fighters. So overall, Gary Copeland, in my opinion, he needs to be fired immediately. And I'm not the guy who usually wants someone to be fired immediately, but after watching Gary Copeland referee fights over the last year or two, yeah, it's not good. So yeah, I don't want it to see him in the UFC octagon anytime soon. All right, now up next we got Jason Herzog. Again, I also think that Jason Herzog is very much overrated. All right. A lot of people at the time thought that Jason Herzog was one of the best referees, but recently he has been doing fighters dirty, especially in high critical situations. Take for example, the Song Yadong versus Henry Cejudo fight, where Jason Herzog just kind of let the third round play out as Henry Cejudo's like, "I can't see," and then Jason Herzog, for some reason, just said, "Okay, we're gonna go to the cards right after the 3rd round." And also, Jason Herzog, again, he kinda has an issue with early stoppages, like the Nasruddin Imavov versus Jared Cannonier fight. That was simply egregious. I know it happened last year, and ever since then, Jason Herzog hasn't had that many screw-ups, but again, that was simply egregious. So it's gonna take a while for me to forget that. So I'm gonna say that Jason Herzog, he's a little bit overrated by most people. Again, he is a good referee. It's just I wouldn't put him as the gold standard. Or I can't say that he rarely messes up when he's had big fuck ups from time to time. All right, now up next we got Mike Beltran. See, Mike Beltran, I don't know how people rate him, but honestly, I feel like Mike Beltran very similar to Marc Goddard. And the reason I say this is because of what happened a couple of months back between Asu Almabayev versus Manel Cap. Mike Beltran was the referee for that fight, and throughout the fight, Asu Almabayev was complaining to Mike Beltran about Manel Cap poking the fingers into Almabayev's eyes. And when you watch the replay, again, Manel Cap was clearly poking the eyes of Asu Almabayev. But for some reason, Mike Beltran watched the replay twice, and he did not say anything to Manel Cap. That is simply concerning, and I don't think this is a one-time offense. I've seen Mike Beltran kind of try to overly exert his a authority and position of power as the referee against fighters to like an extreme extent. It's very similar to Marc Goddard, in my opinion. They're both kind of filled with rage, and they don't really enforce the rules like you want them to, or at least the way it should be, to be more specific. So Mike Beltran is I'd be pretty concerned for certain fighters. All right, that's the difference though. it's not like Mike Beltran's doing this for home crowd favorite fighters. So I'm very interested to see like who Mike Beltran does these things for, but it does feel like Mike Beltran at times he doesn't really enforce the rules the way it should be, and it's very similar to a Marc Goddard situation. So I'm gonna say that Mike Beltran, yeah, he's not that good as a referee. All right, now up next we got Keith Peterson. I think many people's opinion on Keith Peterson is based on Dominic Cruz, on how Keith Peterson kind of allegedly showed up drunk and smoking like cigarettes to his championship fight with Henry Cejudo back in 2020. But since then, I don't think Keith Peterson's really messed up. All right. And I'm kind of dating this over like 3 or 4 years. Yeah, I don't really recall a time that Keith Peterson has heavily messed up. I know the opinions of Keith Peterson are very negative, but personally, when I look through his history, I'm like, I don't really recall a time. It's just that the Dominic, Cruz fight was simply, like, one of the most important fights at the time, and it was a championship bout, and also Dominic Cruz never really says that about referees normally, so I understand why Keith Peterson gets a lot of slack, but recently, I don't think he's messed up, so I hope that Keith Peterson continues that track, because I think Keith Peterson, again, although, like, he gets a lot of shit online, I think he's very underrated compared to most referees. Alright, up next, we got Lukasz Bosaki, I believe that's his name. Yeah, he's basically the European ref. You'll typically see him whenever the UFC goes to London or France or any part of that region of the world. And from what I've seen, he's pretty good. Now, I don't watch KSW fights consistently to know like how often he messes up or anything like that. But whenever he's refing fights in the UFC, I think he does a very solid job. I rarely notice him, and that's what's good about referees. Like you have to not be able to notice them. Like there's a difference between like, oh, there's like a good ref and it's like, oh, he's doing well because I don't really notice anything he does. I don't know if that really makes sense. He just doesn't make any mistakes. That's why he's never in the headlines. And that's good for a referee. So I'm going to say that Lukasz Bosaki, I believe that's his name. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I think he's a gold standard referee because he doesn't mess up. And every time he's in the UFC, the fights play out pretty cleanly. All right, now up next, I'm going to go with Kerry Hatley. Kerry Hatley is the guy that was refereeing Jalen Turner versus Bobby Green. And while I do understand that he hasn't had any huge fuck up like that since, again, Kerry Hatley, what are you doing letting Jalen Green nearly kill Bobby Green live on TV? All right. I would be concerned if my referee were to be Kerry Hatley. I know he's gotten a lot of flack during that fight, and rightfully so. And he hasn't really had any major screw ups like that since. But still, that thought just cannot get erased off the back of my head, and for that reason, I'd be concerned. Now, unlike these two guys, he's nowhere near as consistent when it comes to fuck ups, but at the same time, I've never seen Marc Goddard or who's this guy? Mike Beltran. I've never seen them really stop fights egregiously like Kerry Hatley has. So Kerry Hatley, I know he's a good ref, but yeah, again, one fight with Jalen Turner versus Bobby Green is just very concerning. And I'd be concerned if my fighter were to ever be refed by Kerry Hatley. All right, now up next we got Mark Smith. I'd say Mark Smith rarely messes up. I do remember from time to time he will call like an early stoppage, but considering how many fights he has to ref for the UFC, I think it's a pretty good track record over the last couple of years. I do believe that Mark Smith is one of the top three best referees of all time. And there's a reason why a lot of people find Mark Smith to be one of the most underrated refs in the UFC or MMA space in general. So, Mark Smith, again, he will mess up from time to time, but I'm going to give him kind of a pass for that because, again, he hasn't done that egregious of a mess up. And he has to ref like nearly every single fight every time he's called upon for an event. So, Mark Smith, he's a very good referee that really messes up. All right, now up next we got Jacob Maltolvo. I'm gonna say Jacob. I'm gonna say he. I don't know. I think he rarely messes up. Right, like I don't really recall a time where I've seen him really mess up. If anything, I can move him up to the gold standard, but maybe there's like some case in like 2021 or something along those lines where like Jacob Maltova like kind of did an egregious fuck up. But again, that's kind of the nature of the game. And the only reason I'm putting this guy here is because I don't really watch any fights outside of the UFC unless it's for tape study. So from what I've seen, Jacob Maltovo, whenever he's in the UFC, I don't think he's messed up. Right? Maybe I'm not recalling correctly. Maybe I have to dig a little bit deeper. But from what I'm seeing, he doesn't really have any mess ups in the UFC. And last but not least, we're gonna go with Jeff Rexroad. This guy, I'd be concerned. Like many of you probably wouldn't know who Jeff Rexroad is. I think Jeff Rexroad, he's kind of in like the Kerry Hatley situation right now. All right, maybe not to that extreme, but last night between Alexander Hernandez and Carlos Diego Ferreira, like I watched Carlos Diego Ferreira take like 12, 13 unnecessary ground and pound shots after Hernandez dropped him with a nasty elbow and proceeded to beat the fuck out of him. And Jeff Rexroad during that time was just hovering around. He did not really take any action to stop Alexander Hernandez from unnecessarily beating the shit out of Carlos Diego Ferreira. So moving forward, whenever I see Jeff Rexroad referee a UFC event, I'm going to be concerned because again, that stoppage was really late. And again, you can't really be doing that, especially to a guy like Carlos Diego Ferreira, who's like 40 years old, who's been in the sport for a long time. Like those guys, like they're not coming back the same after that. So yeah, I'm gonna say that Jeff Rexroad. I'd be concerned whenever my favorite fighters are supposed to fight under the safety of Jeff Rexroad. All right, that's going to be it for today's video. Leave a comment down below any other referee that I missed for this tier list. And also, leave a comment down below how you guys would rate these referees overall. But other than that, if you guys want to see more videos like this, please make sure to like and subscribe so we can get this channel monetized. But other than that, I will probably see you guys later. Peace.